Good morning, Merry Christmas. Welcome to St. Clair if you're visiting. Good to have you here. It's very cold outside. Last night at the evening masses, at the 4 o'clock mass, it got all the way up to 25 degrees. So we were nice and warm, and there were over 1,500 people in here. So we had the air conditioning running because apparently every person produces 50 BTUs of heat, and so 50 times 600. Anyway, it was good. It was great. So many people. Begs the question. It's like, wow, all these people, all these Catholics that live here in the area, and where are they normally? But anyway, you came to Mass on Christmas Day at 10 a.m. instead of being at home opening presents. So I know none of you are those folks. But if you are, welcome. It's good to have you, and we're here every Sunday. So it's Christmas, right? Christmas is this day where we get excited because it's this kind of celebration, right? We celebrate that God becomes man. We celebrate the fact that Jesus takes on our flesh. We exchange gifts. We have, fancy dinners or whatever we do. Family gets together. It's a nice time. I'm not going home until tomorrow, which is weird to me. I don't think there's been a Christmas where I wasn't at home on Christmas Day, but I guess that's part of growing up. In fact, I haven't done any of my Christmas shopping yet. I had to buy cat food the other day, and I went into the pet store to get cat food, and they had like the little section of Christmas gifts for your pets. And so, of course, I bought my cats Christmas presents, and I thought to myself, I haven't bought my siblings their Christmas presents yet, but that's all right. I've got more important things to do, and I'll figure something out. Okay, so it's Christmas, and we're here, and we're at Mass, and we're celebrating, and it's beautiful. And we're here to celebrate the birth of a baby. The birth of a baby that changed history. The birth of a baby that changed the world. The gospel we hear in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. The Word is Jesus Christ. He's the incarnate Word. He's the Word that took on flesh, the Word that became man, the Word that dwells among us, right? The Word became flesh and built His dwelling among us. That's called the prologue to John's Gospel. It's the Christmas morning Gospel. There's a different Gospel for each of the different Christmas Masses. And that one's kind of the really theological Gospel passage. But it tells us that Christ took on our flesh. He became man. He dwells among us. He lives in our midst. And that in doing so, He was the light that came into the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. We live in a world of darkness. We live in a world of pain. We live in a world of suffering. We live in a world of sadness. We need that light. A lot of us like to try and find the light ourselves. We like to try to discover it in our own ways. We like to maybe even try to create it. But in reality, we have to recognize that light can only come from Jesus Christ. That light can only be made present to us through acknowledging Jesus Christ. Last night's Gospels, the evening Gospel, was the genealogy. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Deacon Stephen got to read it twice last night, and it's like, why are we doing this? Everybody has that one relative that's obsessed with the family tree and the genealogy, right? And has spent all this money on Ancestry and 23andMe and whatever else, and is like always asking you intrusive questions to try and figure out more about the family's genealogy. Well, it turns out that's really important, because where did we come from, right? The genealogy starts with Abraham, works all the way down, gets to David, the king, and then gets all the way down to Jesus, right? It's important because we recognize where He came from, and we can kind of sew together the tapestry of salvation history. And in the genealogy, there's some good guys, and there's some not so good guys. And we recognize that God uses them. God uses all of us, whoever we are. He uses us in our sinfulness. He uses us despite our sinfulness, to bring about good, to transform us, to transform the world, to make us holy. And then the midnight gospel is in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be enrolled. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, just imagine if that happened, right? Today, like in our world. Government's like, all right, everybody has to go to their ancestral homeland and enroll. Well, my grandparents, great-grandparents, they immigrated to the United States and arrived in Superior, Wisconsin. I don't think that on December 24th I would want to go to Superior, Wisconsin, let alone lead a donkey with a pregnant woman on it who's about to give birth. I don't know why anybody would want to go to Superior, Wisconsin. In fact, my dad said they used to go up there in the summers as kids and they had good cheese that they would bring back, but I assume that it's just like a frozen block of ice right now where there's no life. But what we see in that story, right, that Joseph, he's got to lead Mary to Bethlehem, right, the city of David. Again, that genealogy is important because Jesus is in the line of David. And so Joseph has to lead his wife there because someone told him they had to go. Nobody cares that she's 8 months and 3 weeks pregnant. And then they get there. Nobody wants them. There's no room in the inn. Can't find anywhere. Time to have a baby. Well, there's a manger. Or the manger is the thing that Jesus was laid in. And we make the manger scenes look nice and inviting and warm, right? But it was a cave with animals. It probably didn't smell good. Animals doing what animals do in the cave. Okay, and it's time to have your baby. So we're going to do that here. And there's the donkey next to the baby. I don't think anybody would want that. I've never had a baby, obviously. But I don't think anybody would want to have a baby in that setting, in those circumstances. And we think about it, it's the incarnation, right? God becomes man. God takes on our flesh. He dwells among us. The light interrupts the darkness. Why did he do it that way? He's the creator of heaven and earth. Why did he do it that way? If I were God, I would come riding down from heaven on a chariot pulled by like unicorns or something. It will scare unicorns. And I'd be like throwing lightning bolts at people, like Zeus. That's what happens when we invent our own gods, right? The Greeks invent, and they're like, well, God must be scary and throw lightning bolts. But he chose to come into the world in this way. He chose to come into the world as a child, just like all of us came into this world. He chose to come into this world born of his mother, just like all of us were. He chose to come into the world in a humble way. And so we have our first image of Jesus, the innocent baby. And then we have our last image of Jesus. We have to remind ourselves that Jesus on the cross is the same Jesus in the manger. Recognizing that he came into the world to show us through the darkness, through the suffering, through the pain, that there is hope, that there is reason, that through our suffering, we bring about life, right? Those of you that have given birth, was it a fun process? Did you enjoy it? You're like, oh, that was great. I'm told it's not a pleasant process. But through that pain, through that suffering, brings about life. Through the pain and suffering brings about life. We live in a world full of suffering, full of darkness, and we all are trying to make it go away. We're all trying to say, no more suffering, no more pain. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be hurt. Sometimes we can't control that. Christ reminds us that it's through suffering that we are given life. It's through the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that we are restored, that we are made whole, that we are made new. that the light takes over the darkness. We had midnight mass last night. Father Michael did it, but I wanted to see, and we had the brass quintet. It was beautiful, and so I couldn't go to bed until it was over, and so I didn't go to bed till 2 in the morning. I was like, it's okay. I got 10 a.m. mass, and so I wake up. There's 3 cats in my face because they want their food, and I forgot to close the blinds on one of my windows, and you wake up in the morning and the windows, it's the light. Because you can't contain light, right? It goes everywhere. Jesus is that light that we cannot contain. He's that light that makes himself present, that makes himself known, that overcomes the darkness of sin, the darkness of error, the darkness of death. He overcomes it. And so Christmas, it's about this time for us to recognize that light shines through us, shines within us, that we're called to make that light present in the world. I think about the Holy Family on Christmas. Joseph, what must have been going through his head? Probably felt like a failure. He's like, okay, the angel came to me in a dream. And the angel appeared to Mary, and I know this is the will of God, but couldn't I have done better? Couldn't I have better built up a platform for the will of God to be completed? Why did it have to be like this? Why did it have to be in the manger? Why did it have to be in Bethlehem? Well, it had to be in Bethlehem to fulfill the prophecy. I understand that. Joseph's there. He's probably really distraught. The Blessed Mother's just sitting there in the presence of her Son and her God, and she's good with that. And then the shepherds come in from the fields, right? And they're like, hey, we heard commotion. The very first people outside of the family that Christ reveals himself to are shepherds. Shepherds, 2,000 years ago, were kind of like teamsters, like truck drivers. They were always gone. They were never home. They didn't have any time to really practice Judaism because they were constantly in the field with their sheep. In fact, they were considered bad Jews because they didn't go to the temple, they didn't offer sacrifice, because they couldn't leave their sheep. They lived outside among sheep. Deodorant wasn't a thing, of course, 2,000 years ago. They probably weren't the most pleasant people to be around, and they're the ones that show up to view the Christ child. And then the second group of people that come are the Magi, right? These weird pagans from the east. They show up, and they pay homage to the Christ child. And so the first two groups of people that Christ reveals himself to are unfaithful, non-practicing members of Judaism and pagans. He's not born among the Pharisees. He's not born in Herod's court. He's born in this lowly, simple state. And he reveals himself to the outcasts. Now, maybe sometimes we feel like outcasts. Maybe sometimes we feel forgotten. Maybe sometimes we feel like, I can't fix this. I can't make this problem go away. I can't find the light to overcome the darkness. But we recognize in Christ that He is the light. He is the light that overcomes. The thing about Christmas is that there's this tiny baby, and everybody's worried. Everybody's confused. What's going on? And what we fail to remember is that the baby's the one that's in charge. Babies are helpless. There aren't any babies here, are there? All the babies were here last night. It was like baby town. They were very loud. I picked up a little baby as a stunt and held her, little Jocelyn. Everybody went, "Aw." And Father Michael was standing in the back, and he's getting all flustered. He's like, "That's such low-hanging fruit." But anyway, I held this little baby, right, to show that babies are helpless. What do babies do? They cry, and then you feed them, and then they poop. Maybe they throw up on you, and then they go to sleep, and then 2 hours later, you do it all over again. They can't sustain themselves, right? Like animals are born, and they figure things out, right? They can walk, they know how to find their mother. Babies are helpless. They can't do anything. Yet the baby's the one that's in charge. The baby's the one that has all the answers. The baby's the one that sets us free. So in our own lives as Christians, do we recognize that? Do we recognize that Christ has the power to overcome darkness? That Christ is the answer to all of my questions, all of my struggles, all of my pain? That Christ is the one who sets me free? That Christ is the one that makes me new? Do we recognize that? Do we allow Him to transform us? Do we welcome Him into our lives? Do we welcome Him into our homes? Do we pray? Do we talk to God? Do we allow Him to order our lives? Do we trust in Him? Or do we say, "No, I have all the power, I have all the answers, I can fix it"? Gosh, I can think of so many examples in my life where I messed up and I tried to fix it and it just got worse. And I tried to fix it more and it got worse again, right? And it's like, maybe this one last effort. You're digging a hole in the ground, right? It's like, I'm getting deeper in here. What if I just drop the shovel? There's that little baby back there. Crying, helpless little baby. It's a good thing, though. But that we recognize we put ourselves into this difficult situation. That's what salvation history is about, right? Man falls in sin. Man struggles. Man tries to get up. Can't. God makes covenants. We screw them up. Finally, He's like, "Okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix it. You just have to let me. You just have to acknowledge that I can fix it. You have to put that shovel down." Christ became like us so that we can spend eternity with Him in heaven. If we want to boil Christmas down to one sentence, that's it. Christ became like us so that we could spend eternity with Him in heaven. God humbled Himself. God condescended. Right? He lowered Himself to be with us. Father Michael gave me a t-shirt as a Christmas gift, and on it says, "People say that I'm condescending," and then underneath in parentheses it says, "That means I talk down to people." I'm going to wear that to Christmas tomorrow with my family. But when we say that Jesus condescended, that God condescends to be with us, right, the real meaning of that word, it means that He lowered Himself to be with us. He lowered Himself to be with us so that we could be raised up with Him. So today is Christmas. Tomorrow the world's going to say Christmas is over. But it's not, right? 12 days of Christmas. We get to celebrate Christmas. Make sure, you tell people Merry Christmas tomorrow and for the next several days and watch them in bewilderment as they're like, "What? Christmas is over." Christmas started on, October 15th this year. But no, Christmas is a season that we celebrate. It's a season of joy. It's a season in which we recognize, again, that light has come crashing into the darkness, and the darkness cannot comprehend it. That Christ has made himself to dwell among us, that Christ has made himself like us. And for that we ought to rejoice. And so on this Christmas day, let us pray that Christ may continue to make himself present to us, that we may truly recognize that light, that we may take that light out into a world of darkness, so that light may shine brightly, and so that the darkness cannot overcome it, and so that Jesus Christ can make himself present here on earth and in all of our hearts.